Welcome into the Hockey Hub. Kasey and Sophia back with you on this Friday. A long whirlwind of a week. We don't have to get into all of that because we have one of our favorite guests joining us, Pete Blackburn. You've seen him as a host on What Chaos, as well as a CBS sports analyst. Just going to bring you right in to the madness here at Hockey Hub. Pete, how's it going?
Good. I mean, outside of the recent Bruins stretch, but we'll get to that.
Actually, let's start with that. How are you feeling about your Boston Bruins? Because we always talk about your tweets, your elite one-liners. Maybe you can help us dial in on some emotions, especially over the course of the last week and the start of the season.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, getting pretty sick of moral victories. Like, it was nice to start the season with some actual victories, and I feel like maybe my expectations changed a bit too much based off of a 3-game sample, but I liked what I saw in the first 3 games. Last 6, not so much, and at this point, I think I'm getting frustrated, the fans are getting frustrated, the players are getting frustrated, everybody's frustrated.
Before I defer to Sophia, do you feel bipolar when you tweet? Because last night I almost thought about deleting tweets and I was like, no, that's dumb. Because I was riding every emotional high that took place during that game.
Are you a fan of The Office? You remember the dinner party scene? Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap? Yeah, that was last night during the Bruins game.
Okay, I'm not alone. Sophia, go ahead. Sorry, I had to ask.
No, I mean, I'm just wondering, like, listen, I promised myself that what I said in preseason, what I said in the summer, I was going to like ride out all year. Like, I can't be one of those people unless it like becomes, unless we're talking like 30 games in and they have like, 2 wins. But I promised myself I would stick to the narrative. Like, this is going to be a fun team to watch. It's going to be an emotional roller coaster. And it so far has proven to be an emotional roller coaster, except they're just on the wrong side of the end of that roller coaster. But does the 1-goal game thing, losing 4, I think it's 4 out of the 6. Other than that, the last one was a 2-goal game because of the empty net. But does that do anything for you, or are you like, no, a loss is a loss? Does that matter? Because like if we're talking 2 of those games, or even 3 are wins, we're not having the same conversation today.
Yeah, like honestly, it's a weird place to be because like the games are entertaining and this is a watchable hockey team and you like a lot of the things that you see. It's just, it's not all there, and all of the results recently have been losses and, not even 1 point. So like what I try to grapple with the fact that last year things were so bad and the team was bad and it was unwatchable. It was boring. It was frustrating. Everything was bad across the board last year, and maybe that's conditioned me to accept some of just the entertainment factor this year. But obviously, when you've lost 6 straight and the game's been close, like that's frustrating, and it's really starting to show on the players and Marco Sturm. And you want some of the results to end up in the win column for the greater good here, because at some point this will all accumulate and the frustration will boil over. So I don't know. I'm kind of going back and forth because it's an entertaining team. The games are entertaining, but results-wise, they're at the very bottom of the league, and that's not where you want to be. I guess. I guess it depends on who you ask, because there are some people that'll say you don't want the loser points, and if you're going to be a bad team, you want to be in a position to get a high draft pick at the end of the year. I get that, but you don't want to lose 6 in a row at any point either.
Yeah, definitely not. Well, you've had an opportunity to sit down with a number of NHL players, and like what's really awesome about your show is just, I feel like they can let their guard down. You guys are really just kind of having a conversation. The mental aspect is weighing very heavy into what's taking place for the Bruins right now. Like, how much more time do you think this roster has in order to get past this mental fatigue and this mental hurdle before it just tends to have a different sort of impact or consequence, one would say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the consequences are already there, and you're seeing it in like these post-game interviews, specifically on Thursday night. You could really see it on the guys' faces that they were disappointed with the result. Marco Sturm was very, very disappointed with how consistently underwhelming the results are, even though there are moral victories and things to find positives. But as for the roster and how long it's going to be before changes need to be made, like I don't know the answer to that, and I don't I feel like where they are right now and this year as a whole, like the roster should constantly be in flux because this feels like a bridge year and it feels like a learning year for this team. I don't think anybody headed into this season feeling like this team was ready to contend and ready to punch among the league's elite. So you find out what you have and you make adjustments along the way. But ultimately, you just want to feel good about where you're headed. And right now, given the results and given some of the consistent frustrations, it's hard to feel good about where you're at.
Obviously, some of the mistakes are like, like a dumb turnover or just pass up the middle of the ice and then that gets intercepted. And, from players that you're like, oh, you've been in the league for a while, that's just a dumb mistake. So then you think, okay, that's fixable because it is. But some of the other goals, like if we're talking Florida and if we're talking last night's game, it's like you have these in the defensive end, you have these guys that are like all of a sudden wide open. So there's obviously a breakdown in terms of communication with this like hybrid defense, like zone, man, what's going on? Why is someone wide open? Why do they have all this room and space? Do you feel like once that gets cleaned up, whichever way, however long that takes, that we're looking at a different result, or are there so many more mistakes than the two that I've just mentioned?
No, I mean, I think that it's a lot of this is definitely fixable, or at least like there's ability to move in the right direction. But I also think that that's part of what's been so frustrating so far is that the biggest point of weakness has been on the back end, which to me is really surprising because I headed into the season feeling like the path to success was their blue line. And, obviously losing Hampus Lindholm was a major setback that they also suffered last year. But I thought that the path forward for this team would be, the top line and the back end, because those are the two things that I felt most secure in. And the back end has just been an abject disaster over the past couple of weeks. And they're letting in soft goals in net as well. And again, those things can be corrected. But when you look at how many winnable games they've played with their compete level and their ability to generate offense, you want to see those positive results, and where you thought you had a strength has been a weakness over the past couple of weeks.
I promise we're going to get to something lighter and more fun. We're going to pull you into a game of pass and shoot here shortly, Pete. But to the point of Sophia bringing up the hybrid system, like how much of this could you say could just still be growing pains and learning a hybrid system? We've heard a number of players talk about how difficult it is to actually execute this well. And yeah, you have to have the right personnel, and we know what cards were dealt leading into this. So, is there a little bit more wiggle room there, considering this is not an easy thing to get and grow into?
Yeah, there has to be. This is a new group. This is a new coaching staff. This is a team that is not overflowing with pure talent. There has to be a certain patience attached to this group, but it has looked really, really ugly at points. And I think that that's where the frustration is. And it's looked ugly from guys that you expect more from, specifically Charlie McAvoy. You expect more from a guy who's kind of vying for the captaincy on this team. Obviously, he's not perfect, and this whole experience is new enough that you can explain away some of the struggles. But yeah, it's just been a situation where you're hoping for more from your top guys, and at certain points, it just has looked like that the growing pains have been attached to them as well.
It's such a small sample size. I feel like if someone judged me on 10 episodes, in my first 10 episodes of my career with the Bruins, I'd be like, yo, give me a chance. Give me a longer stretch. So to say, let's talk about Marco Sturm so far, such a small sample size, and he deserves way more of a leeway before we start really talking about, does he have the room, does he not? But I was talking to Judd Surratt, our play-by-play guy, and he was saying, and I really liked this point, he was like, we're not in the room in intermission. We don't know what's going on. But the way he can tell the team has buy-in and that he's influential and he has a good voice in the room is the way they come out when they've been down in the third period. Do we want to see that at the start of the game? Yes. Would we like to see a full 60, which is a cliche? Yes. But the Bruins of last year, down a goal or 2 goals or having a bad second period, like game over in the third. It just, you weren't seeing that. We're seeing this like resurgence or what, I don't even know if that's a word, but you guys know what I'm saying. And I feel like that does speak to Marco Sturm's ability to keep his guys in it. He said in his interviews, Sturm, that like not everyone's on the bus, so not everyone's bought in, and that's his job. So he's even saying like there's something missing over here. But rant over, I guess. But Pete, what's your take with all that being said with Marco Sturm and how he has this group?
Yeah, one of the big positives here is the buy-in, and maybe he thinks it's not across the board, but like from what I see, the compete level is definitely there, and there's definitely response time that wasn't there last year. But some of the things that have carried over is how they respond to the response, I guess, because you're seeing a lot of quick goals after they respond that they're surrendering, and that's so frustrating. And I know that like every fan has to be over that by this point, because dating back to last year, like that made me want to rip my hair out. And, you know, this is still a first-year NHL head coach that we're talking about. So, like, he's got things to learn, and he's got, you know, things to experiment with this year, too. So I'm definitely giving him some leash. And at the end of the day, like, a chef can only be as good as his ingredients. And I think when people look at this roster, you have to understand, again, this is not a team that's overflowing with talent. So he's doing the best job that he can, and I have confidence in what I've seen to this point, even through training camp. Like, they were talking about, this is one of the best training camps they've had in years, and I believe it, and I think that that's shown early on in the season. So there just has to be patience with both the group and the coaching staff.
All right, I think I can only get in one quick shooter pass here. So the biggest response that I've seen from fans thus far is call Providence. If you could shoot or pass on calling up a player, any player, or multiple players from Providence, would you shoot on this or pass? Again, like, I think that this roster has to be in flux, and so I'm going to shoot on it. Like, there has to be a mandate that if you're not doing your job is not safe, because this is not a solidified team. This is a bridge year. This is a finding out year. You learn what you have, and if you're not proving it on this roster, you can be gone in a second. And that's just the way that it has to be, because this team is not in its final form. It's not even close to being in its final form. So if you're not pulling your weight, you're out of here.
I love that. And like, I love that Kasey Middlestat was sat, and then we've seen the response from him. And like, he's a veteran and he's been on several different teams. He seemed rather safe, and he wasn't. And I feel like that does send a message throughout the group. And, you know, he was asked, Marco Sturm was asked if Laura would be sat at some point. And he's like, well, we really need him. But, you know, that's if you're losing anyway, I don't see an issue with sitting someone and then bringing up someone from Providence. So I would shoot. I think you said shoot. I would shoot with you on that.
Is it too much to ask for you to pick a player?
To shoot, or I mean, I'm not shooting any players. No,
please don't. We would like to have you back and stick around.
Like right now, obviously there are guys that you look at and you say they're not really pulling their weight. And you mentioned Mason Lohrei, and he's had a really tough start to the season, and he's a young player, and they're really banking on him being something and filling out their back end. Would I go
not call
away?
out anybody right here. I mean, like, who you would call on from Providence?
I don't know. I haven't kept a close enough eye on Providence.
Okay.
Like, I'm letting the smarter people make those calls. But based off of what I've seen here, I think that there's a lot of guys who I would say are not totally safe.
Okay, I would totally agree. But I think that creating the discomfort, as Sophia mentioned, like, that's gotten the better of some of these players to show some results. So we'll see, and we'll see if any calls come in quite soon. We're going to get to our first break here on the Hockey Hub, but don't go anywhere. A little bit more shooter pass on the other side, more of a breakdown of last night's loss, and then we get ready to look ahead after talking to Mike Commito about his Bruins 365 release. Don't go anywhere. Stick with us here on the Hockey Hub. Back at it with the Hockey Hub on this Friday. Pete's still hanging around with us, Kasey and Sophia, as usual here on the Hockey Hub. I promised to finally get into some fun. We started to get into shoot or pass, so we're going to go ahead and head to the next question. Sophia, do you want to take this one?
Sure, I'm looking at the list. The Bruins let young goalie Brandon Bussi go on waivers where he was claimed by the Carolina Hurricanes. Can you tell I'm reading? He's 2-0-0 with a .911 save percentage and a 197 GAA. The question is, shoot or pass, did the Bruins make the right move by letting Bussi go and keeping DiPietro?
I mean, I personally would have tried to find a way to move off Korpisalo. I know that's, harder to do than, maybe they'd want based off the contract situation. I just haven't been a Korpisalo guy, and I would have liked to see that spot be given to one of the young guys, whether it was DiPietro or Bussi, and I'm glad to see Bussi get his opportunity and do well at the NHL level. But I would say that, I guess, shoot or pass, I would say pass in terms of, I would have found a way to keep one of those guys in the mix as the backup.
I'm just going to jump in really quick. Even after, if you look at his numbers, they're not good, but you've been watching every game and we know where the breakdown is. But even through, 4 that he's played, 5, you're not Korpisalo? Because I've been very cool with how he's been in net.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he's a bad player or a bad goaltender. I just think that you kind of know what Joonas Korpisalo's ceiling is, and with his contract situation and given the state of this team, I think that if you could find a team that was more desperate for a veteran goaltender that might want Korpisalo, I would allocate that spot to a younger guy that may give you a better glimpse at the bigger picture here. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying on the previous side of the break, which is, at what point do you just want to give opportunity to other players and younger guys to find out what you have? And I think that backup goaltending spot is another place that I would look there.
I love it. Are you a fan of blending the lines? Yes or no?
In terms of mixing and matching?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, with the exception of the top line, which has been a real point of strength for you going back a couple of years now. Everything beyond that can absolutely be mixed and matched. And again, this is a team that has probably too many bottom 6 forwards, too many middle 6 forwards, however you want to classify it. There's a lot of guys who can play in interchangeably there, and that's not necessarily a great thing because I think that they don't have enough defined top 6 forwards. But mix and match all you want, and if you can, strike gold or at least strike a spark, then stick with that as long as you can.
All right, so shoot or pass on shaking up the Bruins' top 6 to try to spark more offense. If shoot, what would you do?
I would pass on that right now because, when I look at it, those top 2 lines are producing. And even when you look at Mittelstadt, Zacha, and Arvidsson, a couple games ago against Florida, that was arguably their best line.
Yeah.
And, I think that this top 6 right now is definitely not the problem. Is it underwhelming on paper? Sure. But the problem right now is the back end. So if you can defend well enough, you should be winning some games. So I wouldn't jump to mess with the top 6 as a way to patch things right now.
I don't think this is on the list, but I'm just going to make it up. But shoot or pass, or it's kind of on the list here, but I'm rearranging the words. Shoot or pass, making a big trade this early to fix the problem, to seemingly get, whatever, if you can, pieces to kind of fix the problems on the back end.
I just think the boat has too many holes. I don't know what singular trade you're going to swing this early in the season or at any point this season that is going to really change the outlook of this team. And, it is what it is. This team can be better and they should aim to be better, but they're not going to make such a big jump that it really changes the whole outlook of this season. So if you can find a trade that makes sense for you in the short term, but also the bigger picture, absolutely go for it. But, in terms of making a trade just to provide a spark or quote unquote fix something, I just don't see that being reasonable or logical.
All right. Do you want to pivot from Bruins for a second and look at some pretty sick jerseys that made a debut the other day? Avs versus Hurricanes throwbacks right here. Which one was your favorite, Pete? I don't know if I saw it on social media anywhere.
I mean, they're both great. And like, I just think ultimately the Whalers uniform is one of my favorite of all time. That logo is an all-time sports logo. So I would give the advantage to the Hartford uniforms. What I'll say is, seeing Nordiques versus Whalers, while cool, also feels like kind of a desecration bowl where you're stealing and digging up a grave of these deceased teams and playing dress up. So like, it's cool, but it also gives me a little bit of conflicting feelings.
At least it's October.
That's true. We're close to Halloween, so it's fitting.
Yeah.
Did you, just because of the area, did anyone in your family, like, were they Hartford fans at any point?
No, a full Bruins family. I do know a few Hartford people, and a lot of Hartford people know exactly why they lost the team. They're upset about it, but they don't really hold that grudge. I think that it is weird how often the Carolina Hurricanes go back to the Whalers. Well, but again, I just said that that's one of the best logos and uniforms in the history of the league. So why not? Why wouldn't they?
Why not exactly? It's not a shooter pass, but if you don't mind, I want to get your take on Fraser Minten, because even yesterday, I think it was just 3 shots on goal, but they were like pretty great chances. And I'm happy with, I miss Brandon Carlo for what he was in the room. I hope he's happy in Toronto. But what we got on the other way, like, I'm so pumped for what this kid can do and what he can bring. We've seen flashes. It just feels like he needs to get a little bit adjusted. What's your take on Minten so far?
I love him. He looks great. I'd love to see him convert on a few more breakaways. It seems like he's getting a few a game, but like, he's getting those opportunities. He plays hard. His compete level's awesome. I really like the kid. I really like that trade to begin with. Like, as much as Brandon Carlo was useful to the Bruins and was a really good player, great guy in the room. Like, if you're going to trade Brad Marchand, Charlie Coyle, some of these other guys with Brandon Carlo's contract situation, it made sense to strike that trade. And so I think it's working out for the Bruins, and I hope that Minten continues to progress and become the player that we hope he can. What I will say, it is a bit of a bummer to see Carlo being turned into somewhat of a punching bag in Toronto, at least early on in this season. They've been pretty rough on him. So hopefully he can turn it around. Not so much that the Leafs are great, but I'd like to see him not be a punching bag, because he was a great player here.
Yeah, I love the take on Fraser. Anybody else on this roster that probably caught some heat in the offseason that you feel like has slightly changed fans' minds or kind of stood out a little bit more while we circled back to the Bees?
Probably Tanner Jeannot, and that was entirely predictable, right? Because the reason that people were not over the moon with the Tanner Jeannot signing was the numbers, was the contract itself, not the player. Like, the player definitely fits the mold into what Bruins fans want, what they like, and the identity that this team is trying to perform. And you're seeing that in some of these early returns. Like, he goes to the hard areas, he produces around the net, and even last night, responding with a really good fight. Nikita Zadorov said that that provided a spark to the group. That's the kind of stuff that Tanner Jeannot can do to this group. It's just the price point that it comes at that I think some people had an issue with. Maybe with the cap going up and sort of the roster around him filling out, there'll be a less of a problem with that. But yeah, I think that he's won some fans over early on.
Billy and Barry were saying, you mentioned Zadorov, that he's been the Bruins' best defenseman, and I feel like Zadorov's definitely having a completely different season than he had last year so far. Like, I'm loving what Billy said, he's been influential in the games, and I would totally agree. Like, can change the mood or the vibe or the energy with a nice big hit. Obviously, he had that sweet pass yesterday, and I've liked him, and I feel like he's a different person than he was last season. What's your take on 91?
Yeah, Zadorov is always influential, and it just depends which way he's going. Last year, it was way too often in the wrong direction. Like, the penalties killed him. He wasn't great on the back end, but at the same time, consider the circumstances of last year. Their top 2 defensemen went down, and they brought in Zadorov to be like a second or third pairing guy. They did not bring him in to be their first pairing defenseman and get these really tough matchups. So I think this was a nice opportunity for him to reset and fill a role a bit more. And you're right, like, he's been good. He's been influential in a lot of positive directions. And he's a guy who injects a lot of personality and energy and identity into a team. And I think the Bruins have needed that, especially with the absence of a captain. And I'm not saying that Nikita Zadorov is going to be the next captain of this team, but I think that he relishes the opportunity to have a voice and have an impact on a room. And he's a loud voice, and I think they kind of need that right now.
I've been the crazy person that's been on the Zadorov train since day one, and I think that he's a pretty stellar leader, but I like a blunt delivery. You talked about tough matchups, and a lot of people have realized quickly that the Ducks should never be underestimated, hence their ability to stay into the mix of things. Very young caliber of team, especially with Gauthier having his ability to show that he can play. What do you make of the young guys, especially across the league right now, but more so those young Duck players?
Yeah, the Ducks young core is awesome. And like the jump that Cutter Gauthier has made this year has been nothing short of like really, really impressive. And if you're in Anaheim, you love to see that. But their young group is stacked, especially up front. But they've got a couple of guys on the back end that are really great too. I mean, Jackson Lacombe and Pavel Mintyukov are really, really great on the blue line. So their future is bright, and Joel Quenneville has been able to get a lot out of them in the early goings there. And so, if you're in Anaheim right now, Anaheim is arguably the best team in California because it's been a really slow start for the Kings, and you don't have to even mention how bad the Sharks had been leading up to last night's game in New York. So early returns on the Ducks, very, very positive.
What did you make of the horns down last night?
I mean, a personal attack on so many levels for me because I'm a Texas fan. And
I see you tweet about Texas football, so that's why I had to ask, and I waited for my moment. I'm
a huge Longhorns guy. I've got my sneakers are Texas Longhorns sneakers that I'm wearing right now. Okay. So to see 2 of my favorite LA Kings and Adrian Kempe and Quentin Byfield conspire against me to throw horns down in Dallas, of all places. It's 3 hours away from Austin. It didn't need to happen. It happened. I think it's good for the league, honestly. Like, if I'm being totally honest, I want more of it. Seeing some of that, like, poking and prodding at the fans in an opposing building, I love it so much. Such a fan.
Dude, I feel like we only have another minute with you left, so why don't you tell us who you had on your show and what your latest episode of What Chaos is about before we let you go.
I mean, the latest episode is probably the most insane one that we've done in 3 years because we had Judy Jupiter on. And if you're not sure who Judy Jupiter is, I get it. I totally understand. I didn't 2 days ago. But then she filmed this absurdly uncomfortable interview with Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini in New York a couple days ago. And we had her on our show. She is an icon, an absolute roller coaster of a human being. And she went to the Rangers-Sharks game last night. Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith went off. The Sharks got their first win of the season. So all I'm saying is that the Judy Jupiter effect is real. And check out What Chaos. We are live Monday through Thursday on YouTube. And we have a lot of fun covering the league. And it's a blast. Yeah, you guys level everything up. Any chance that she'll start traveling to be like good luck for these guys? I mean, if you're the Sharks, just blow your entire budget on bringing Judy Jupiter along because we saw 2 different teams between pre and post Judy Jupiter in San Jose. That is the best. Well, yes, please go check out that episode and all the content that she has brought to our lives between, I don't want to call it stalking these guys to go to the bathroom. Will Smith might have a different take on that. Pete, as usual, thank you so much for taking the time to come hang out with us. We got more on the other side of another break here on the Hockey Hub, so do not go anywhere. We break down Bruins 365 with Mike Commito and get into the release that came out this Tuesday, October 21st. Pick his brain on the fandom that makes the Bruins community so great and so much more. Right here on the Hockey Hub on the other side of this quick break. All right, you are watching the Hockey Hub. Kasey and Sophia here, and as teased before the break, we've got a fantastic author and historian, NHL author and historian with us, Mike Commito, because he had a fantastic Bruins 365 release on Tuesday. Mike, how are you? Thank you so much for coming to hang with us here on the Hub.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
psyched to have you, psyched to pick your brain, because I was kind of teasing you a little bit before we brought you into the show about where your fandom lies, but the credibility, the people that spoke to the well put together book that you have and how you just kind of reached into the hearts of the Bruins fan base. The easiest question to ask is, like, where is your point of your starting point? How do you begin a book like this with the extensive research and just kind of connecting the hearts of Bruins fans?
Yeah, well, I've been upfront that I obviously don't necessarily bleed black and blue, or black and gold. Sorry, I mean, there's my Leaf fan coming out right now.
There you go. It's snuck in.
Mentioned the blue. I come by it honestly. I'll say that. But to be honest, I picked the Bruins because I had already done, the Canadians. I'd done the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I live in Sudbury, Ontario, which is home to a number of players who had come through the Bruins ranks. Jerry Topozini is one, and it's actually where I'm launching the book in Sudbury after he had spent his time with the Bruins, in the 50s and 60s. He came back to Sudbury. He coached for the Sudbury Wolves, but he also established a bar here that really became like a cultural, a hub for our community. They've done a lot of great work for fundraising minor hockey here. And so I think I had always had a little bit of the Bruins in my heart by being in Sudbury, and more recent players like Nick Foligno, Tyler Bertuzzi come from where I come from. And so there was always that moment there. And of course, given the fact that there's such a storied franchise going back to 1924, like I had known a lot about the team's history. And then, of course, being a Leafs fan, which I've already alluded to, I know about those moments in, 2013, 2018, 2019, 2024. You can stop me at any time. But I'm familiar with those moments. And, of course, some of the greatest players in the game's history, have come through the Bruins. And so I think I had those pieces there. But for me, as a historian, regardless of what my allegiances are, I knew that I wanted to do my research. I wanted to read as much as I could. And I really wanted to try to get to know a lot of the players who may not have been household names for me simply because I hadn't cheered for the team. But I think it was still important that, I did my homework and that I was true to the franchise. Again, I think what I'd learned with previous books is that no one really wants to read a Bruins book from the perspective of a Leafs fan. So I tried to check all my baggage at the door and ensure that I was being true to the franchise, although I will say that there's definitely a few stories where you see my perspective come through. But I think certainly Bruins fans will appreciate that because I haven't had the chance to be on the opposite side of that history just yet.
Listen, anyone who pretends they don't have an allegiance somewhere and it works in the sports world is lying, okay? Because we all got into this because we were fans of something at some point, right? And maybe things change and some people become more neutral, but whatever. You were born and raised a Leafs fan and that's how you got into it. And like you said, there's so many moments that cross over with the history. So I love, that explanation, number one. And number two, as a professional historian, yeah, you said you do your research, you check things at the door. And it's nice to offer a different perspective from let's say someone who was a Bruins fan through and through. Like you get to see it from like a different angle. So I'm just going to get that out of the way. And I think I appreciate the work that you've done and the history and the research, because that's what's, really important. It's about the history of this 365 days. But what are some of your favorite, or maybe if you want to pick one or a couple, do you have any favorite stories that relate to Bruins history? And they're probably not the ones that involve the Leafs, but any favorite ones that you can, pick out of your mind right now?
Well, I mean, there was earlier this week, obviously we had Marchand return to the Garden, and what I'd realized that I obviously didn't realize when I was writing the book, because obviously we hadn't had the schedule yet, but like that was exactly 16 years after he made his NHL debut for the Bruins. And so I had the story in the book about him making playing his first game. But what I decided to do, which again, I think, Sophia, is where I bring in a different perspective that, somebody who's not me may not have, because, I'll reveal this in a second, but rather than focusing on what Marchand did that night back in 2009, when the Bruins hosted the Predators, he had an assist, he was +1, he played 14 minutes, great. And we know that he obviously had a great career after that. That game in itself maybe, wasn't as interesting, but what I wanted to do with that story was I talked about a couple years into his NHL journey, a couple of my buddies ran into him in Toronto after the Leafs had played the Bruins. And what I was trying to do with that story was showcase like how much of a legend Brad Marchand was already in Canada to people who weren't even Bruins fans. Like my two buddies that ran into him, one is an Avalanche fan and he hates the Leafs, and the other one is a Columbus Blue Jackets fan, but they loved Brad Marchand because of what he did at the World Juniors. And my one friend was so excited to see Brad Marchand that he completely I think brushed off Tyler Seguin, who was also outside on the road at this time. And my other friend was kind of running interference and apologizing to Seguin because Seguin was very, I think, complimentary and wanted to introduce himself to my friend, but my friend did not care because all he wanted to do was shake Brad Marchand's hand and talk to him about the game, but more importantly, talk to him about the World Juniors. So I love being able to kind of pull, I think, some of those stories in. I think certainly that's a unique experience that was relayed to me by my friends, but I think it also does speak to, the caliber of player that Marchand was, what he meant to fans, beyond the Bruins, what he's meant to Canada, obviously with what he's done internationally. So, I mean, stories like that where I think I'm able to take the research that I've obviously done, but I think inject some of my own experiences and my own perspective to give you something a little bit different. Because I think you could obviously read a great write-up about Marchand's first game in 2009, but what can we do that's a little bit different that might, give you a different, different way of viewing that?
I love learning about the interactions that take place because I feel like it just kind of helps with different creative angles, which kind of leads me to who are some of the people that you spoke with to kind of piece together these stories for Bruins 365?
So with these books, it's interesting because the stories they're quite short. So there's 365 of them, one for every day of the year, and they're really only about 175 words each. So you don't necessarily have to speak to a lot of people to get interviews. I think interviews are obviously great because they give you that different perspective that you may not get from reading an old game sheet or going through YouTube highlights. So I had done some interviews in the past that I was able to pull into the book. Nick Foligno was one guy that I interviewed, not for the book, but in previous stories, because, when Nick joined the Bruins, I was very excited because, he calls Sudbury home in the summertime and his family comes back here in the offseason. So I thought, if the Leafs aren't going to win the Cup, I definitely want the Bruins to win the Cup because if they win, Nick will bring the Cup back to Sudbury and that would be great for the community to be able to celebrate him and obviously celebrate, the mug coming back to Sudbury. And I did a story on that and, I might have jinxed them because I had already got ahead to what it would be like if Nick and the Bruins did win that year. I talked to Anthony Topazzini, the owner of the Beef and Bird, whose father, Jerry, had played for the Bruins. And he said that if Nick, came back to Sudbury with the Cup and he brought the Cup to the Beef and Bird, he would give him free porchetta for life, which is, Italian roasted pork. The Beef and Bird does this whole tradition where they play porchetta bingos on Saturdays. It's really a Sudbury thing. You'd have to experience it to really believe it and understand what it is. But it is a really big deal here. And so to get porchetta for life, obviously the Stanley Cup is one thing, but porchetta for life is a whole other thing. So I guess I'm probably most upset that maybe I inadvertently jinxed Nick's opportunity to get that porchetta for life because I think that's something that he would cherish forever. But talking to guys like Nick, that obviously getting his perspective, you see a bit of that in the book. And then certainly talking to Anthony Topazzini, hearing about his father. I have a lot of stories about Jerry there because he is a bit of an underrated player just by virtue of the fact that he played, in an era where I think a lot of Bruins fans, may have forgotten what he contributed to the team.
That's a great story. Porchetta for life is not something you get offered every day. So,
No.
So sad, too bad, I guess.
Yeah.
Listen, I have a quick question pivoting here, but obviously, Brad Marchand came back to play recently with the Florida Panthers, first time back. I have a love and hate relationship with the internet. Things can go viral so quickly, but then often the person who started the, who said the thing, and I'm going to bring it up in a second, it's gets lost in the shuffle. But everyone, including us on the broadcast and then on the ESPN broadcast, everyone was talking about how can we believe that to the day that Brad Marchand first played at the Garden, he's back. Was that you? Was that because of your book that people knew that? Because I don't know who started that, but somehow it got out on the internet. And I was like, how did we find this information?
So that day, I do daily hockey history tweets on Twitter or X, whatever we want to call it these days, and I knew that it was going to be his anniversary of his first game because that's the story I had in the book, and I knew that I wanted to share that it was exactly 16 years later that he was going to make his debut, and I think I put out my tweet in the morning about on this day in 2009, Brad Marchand made his NHL debut, and then the Bleacher Report on Ice account, I think, made the connection that he was, of course, playing in Boston that night. They put something out, gave me a little stick tap for that. And then I think that was really started making the rounds. And then obviously you saw it throughout the day. But yeah, that was kind of the night before. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. The odds of this happening. Obviously the hockey gods have a sense of humor because what are the odds that exactly to the day? And, again, it would have been one thing where he made his NHL debut on the road in Nashville. That's great. But like, he made it his debut at home. He's coming home. We knew it was going to be a really emotional return. Obviously, last year he was injured. He wasn't able to be a part of that first trip back. And then everything with the buildup, like, you just knew that it was going to be a special night. So I think certainly given the circumstances around, his return, I think that those tweets and however they were shared, I think there was a lot of legs that day, just because I think everyone was so excited about that. And certainly I don't think it disappointed. I think maybe obviously on the score sheet it disappointed, but certainly I think the ceremony, the tribute to him, I think lived up to its billing.
Yeah, sports are nothing if not poetic.
Sorry, Kasey, I just wanted to say, give you credit where credit is due, because we used that on the show a million times and didn't know where it started. So, Mike, thank you for that, and you deserve the credit for putting that out there.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people had it too, but thank you. I'm just again, it was just worked out very well.
Yes, it did. Well, before we let you go, we got to know what you're working on next, and if it will be another Original Six team getting into the mix.
So it's I'm taking a little bit of a break from the 365 series. I think we can obviously continue to round out the original six. You can go, obviously there's three more. And then of course there's still 29 teams total left that I could do. So I could be doing this, until I'm old and gray. I am working on another book project right now. It is a little bit different. I can't share all the details yet, but I'm really excited about that. It's still going to be in hockey. But it's going to be a wildly different format from this. It will definitely feature at least one former Bruin in the book, in a big goal that he scored against the Leafs in 2013. So I'll leave it at that, but I think you can probably start to piece together a little bit of what that might entail.
All right, so more Bruins and Maple Leafs, love or lack thereof. We will actually have to stand by for the book release. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Everyone, make sure that you are following Mike on X, Twitter, whatever you prefer to call it, so that you stay on top of all of the historic news as well as book releases. And every day, actually, you do post fantastic events that took place in the NHL on this day, guys that scored, and more memorable moments throughout the NHL. Mike, again, I hope that we have you back very soon to tease more on the upcoming book.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be back anytime.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, we're heading to another break in a little bit, but Sophia and I will be sticking around to break down more Bruins hockey, maybe look ahead a little bit, because I feel like we touched on the Ducks quite a bit, right, Sophia?
We did. I feel like we'll look ahead to the Avs, but if you want to go back, I have no problem talking about last night. It's still fresh in my mind, so wherever we want to take it. Do we want to look ahead to the trouble that brews? Because we know the Avs are not easy. We saw them a week ago, or we can break down some of the mistakes yesterday, wherever you want to take it, Kasey.
All right, we'll get that sorted. We'll see where our emotions lie on the other side of this break here on the Hockey Hub. Don't go anywhere. All right, last rally here on the Hockey Hub. We decided to blend the recap before we go into the future, near future being tomorrow. So let's hear from Nikita Zadorov and his emotions to the loss to the Ducks yesterday right here.
It's embarrassing. It's not how we want to play and how we should play. Giving up so many goals every night, expect to win the hockey game. We're scoring 5. That should be an automatic win all the time, That's not our identity, so we got to work on it. We're going to find a way to shut it down before it gets too late.
Is there a common reason, do you think, why you're giving up goals right after you score them? That seems to have happened a lot this year.
Yeah, when you don't play defense, you usually give up goals. That's how it works, yeah.
Does it feel like it's getting late already?
Well, it's 82 games in the season. We only played 9.
What's missing in your own end right now? What do you see in your own end as a group?
We make mistakes. Mental mistakes. We tie the game, need a big shift, go up there, give up a goal. Same thing happened against Florida. So I think it's definitely on their heads and it's fixable. So that's the most frustrating thing. It's not like system breakdowns or anything like this. I thought we spent enough time talking about this in preseason and game 9 of the regular season. Everybody should know where they're at. It's just the individual mistakes are costing us pretty much, yeah.
Is there danger when that sort of thing happens if guys try to do too much to make up for it or to compensate, to try to fix things? Is it hard to get guys to just play their roles?
Well, when you lose 6 in a row, you're trying to squeeze the stick a little bit harder. It doesn't go your way, obviously. The pressure hits. That's when mentally strong teams are good at it. You know, like they don't get it leaked out. They don't let it bleed too much. But I mean, it's a men's game. You have to be prepared for it, and you gotta meet pressure with pressure. You know what I mean? You gotta go up there and make plays at the end of the day. Like the teammates counting on you, organization counting on you, your fans counting on you. So it's up to us to face that challenge and go up there and play tough hockey.
All right, we heard it right there. We've touched on the mistakes to a degree, and then more importantly, he said it, 9 out of 82. But Sophia, you're on the ground with all of this. Like, what did you make of last night's game, last night's loss, and just kind of the temperature of the players moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was in the room. I wasn't, and I haven't been for a long time, just because of the way the schedules worked out and early road trips and stuff like that. But you could feel it through the TV. It feels tense. It feels frustrating. Feels like they're pissed, and they should be. Like, I would be upset if they were like, oh, just another loss. This happens. Mm-hmm. Like, I wouldn't be happy if they weren't pissed. But it's just about corralling that energy and turning it into motivation and like spark versus letting it deflate you. And that's a captain's job, which they don't have one. And then that's a coach's job, and they do. And so that's not just Marco Sturm, but the assistants as well. How do you take that frustration and turn it into motivation? But also, it's like you're human. Anytime you get this close this many times and you have these comebacks, and then a mistake will cost you, it's like, how do you get past that? How do you swallow that and be like, okay? And it's such a team game, which is why, like, I love hockey, you know that. And sometimes, like in basketball, for example, right? It's just like two players can impact a team. But in this case, everyone has a role, good or bad. And so you really can't point fingers, because the one mistake that I'm not going to say like X player makes one game, it's somebody else another game. And if you're in the room thinking that can't be you, that's where like the problem and the toxicity starts. So it's like, let's not point right now fingers at any one person or any couple of people. It's a team effort thing, but it's tough. Like, it's not like, every game in the league is a tough one, but you're looking at Colorado coming up, and I'm not saying we talk about that right now to set that up, but like there is another one where you're like, okay, how do we make sure we don't make it 7? Because this is getting out of hand right now in terms of the streak. It's not like you lost 6 of your last 10 and it's been like split up, even though technically you kind of have. It's 6 in a row, and it's dumb mistakes. And like Nikita Zadorov said, anytime you score 5 goals, anytime you score 4 goals in a game, you probably should come out on the other end, and they're losing those games.
Yeah, and I mean, it also probably would be different if there was more wins on the beginning end of the 6 losses. I mean, that's the hard part about being so early into the season, starting off exceeding expectations as well. You and I have kind of played the mental game here a bit on the Hockey Hub, and I think it's kind of important to tap back into, because you've got players, all of these guys, that have to make sure that they don't find themselves in any sort of mental fatigue. And so coming out of these performances, losing 1-goal games consistently, having that deflating loss last night, and now you got to go back against Colorado. They were very much in the fight against Colorado, in my personal opinion, but like, what do you make of them kind of trying to have this mental climb on top of taking on a tough opponent all over again?
Yeah, actually, funnily enough, out of that road trip, I thought that was the game they were least in. Like Vegas, it's not just because of the score, but like, because Vegas, they were pretty much out, and they were not playing well until, they had those couple of goals. And one of them was like not even, it was like a random shot on net. But if against Colorado, I feel like they did not look their best. So I'm curious to see how that's going to pan out.
What didn't you like, or like what made you feel more so than any of the other ones?
I mean, I don't have the box score in front of me, but I think there were a couple of like egregious turnovers in that one. If I'm remembering that one correctly. Some pretty egregious passes up the middle. The Pasta had and so. And that's the thing. Like, maybe that's a bad analysis on my part, because it is David Pastrnak, who we know can be a difference maker in games. It's like he's allowed to have an off night. He's allowed to make a mistake. I mean, how many mistakes do I make a friggin' broadcast? So, and it doesn't like cost the it doesn't cost the show. Like if the show all of a sudden like blew up because I didn't do well, like it'd be a different story. But so he's allowed to have an off night. But it was just that game that I was like, ooh. And we were in the studio watching. We were like, oh man, like this is showing a different team. Plus, we have to remember that was the second game. So their third straight loss, right? So they lost to Tampa, but they were close. They were in it. Vegas, they didn't look so great. All of a sudden, Colorado comes. Maybe that was like that game stands out to me because it was the beginning of being like, uh-oh, is this a thing? Is this a theme? You know?
Is it turning into a landslide situation versus
yeah, exactly, versus a one-off. So that's why that one sticks out to me. But what was your other question? How do we look ahead? I forget what you asked me. Sorry.
I know. It was kind of a stacked question. Basically, us talking about how you have to mentally overcome and then to be able to be confident enough to mentally overcome a situation going against an opponent that you know is like sitting top of the NHL right now. But that's why I was like, and I know fans have different takes. So like for me, I felt like they were very much in it just because they were able to keep it into a 1-goal game up until the beginning-ish or, top of the third period, and then things kind of went from there. So I wonder if they can pull off of maybe the score through 40 minutes as a confidential point versus like what's been happening as a whole. I hope that made sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and you're right. Up until the third period, we were saying in intermissions, like, this is a winnable game. All of them have been winnable. That's the crazy thing, right? All of them have been winnable. And it's like this defensive breakdown that's been going on that I wasn't at Warrior. I know we got to wrap soon, so I'll shut up here. I wasn't at Warrior, but I'll be checking Adam's tweets and just seeing what they've been working on. But practice makes perfect with this condensed schedule with the Olympics. It's hard to get in proper practice times. Girl, fingers crossed. I'm going to keep what I said at the beginning. They're going to be a fun, entertaining team to watch. I just hope some of this roller coaster ride stuff that we're on, that we'll get the positives of like these crazy wins, and it just makes it more palatable.
I know. I'm right there with you. I mean, a large part of it, and I mentioned it or asked Pete about it earlier, is just like I feel like we've got to give the system some time to have its growing pains and have its moments. And we're seeing Marco trying to figure it out with blending the lines. And then make sure you guys check out what was posted earlier today from practice. A little bit more blend. Some things went back to the basics, and then the deep pairings are getting a little bit of a new look. So Sophia and gang will always have you covered for pre and post game coverage and intermission, by the way. So we've got another game coming down the pipeline here Saturday versus the Abs, round 2. This is a wrap for Sophia and I here on the Hockey Hub, and make sure you catch us every Monday and Friday at 1 p.m. Have a great and safe weekend.